Hi, my name is Freya. Welcome to my kitchen. Today we're going to be doing some baking. We're going to bake some peppermint crisp. It's actually called peppermint crisp and it's my grandma's recipe, but you can really make it any flavour. So my brother doesn't like the peppermint, he says it reminds him of toothpaste, so I make him a caramel version. For myself, I love the peppermint flavour because it reminds me of like mint humbugs and peppermint creams and all those delicious looking sweets. But it's only the icing on top that's flavoured, the rest of it's actually chocolate, so whichever one you want, I'll tell you about that later. But the great thing about this recipe is that it's really cheap to make and takes literally less than 5 minutes. You actually don't even need weighing scales to be able to do it. So if you're a student or you're somewhere and you haven't got weighing scales for some reason, then you can make this with all you need is a cup, in fact, to measure the ingredients. And it's very cheap because you're using just a tiny bit of flour and then cornflakes, which you can buy cornflakes for maybe, let's see, I think these cornflakes I'm going to use are from Morrison's. I think they were less than £1 for this enormous box, and you're only going to use 4 handfuls for this recipe anyway. So let's get baking. So first things first, we're going to need to have sparklingly clean hands and then get our ingredients together. So I've already mentioned that we've got cornflakes. So these ones are Morrison's, and I've already said that they were like under £1. We're going to need some butter or margarine. I'm using stock margarine because it's cheap and it's great for baking, and it's actually also dairy free. I'm going to be needing some sugar, a little bit of sugar, some self-raising flour, I've got here, and then we need a pinch of sugar, a pinch of salt, and some icing sugar. And then lastly, whatever flavour you want to use for the actual cake and for the icing. So chocolate is actually my personal favourite for the actual cake layer. And then either caramel flavour or peppermint flavour if you want to use the icing, that's the icing. Put those there. So if you have any butter that's left over, then just wrap that up because we're going to need that to grease the pan in a minute. Okay, so now you've got your beautifully melted butter, and it's just such, I don't know whether you can see that, it's such a beautiful like yellow golden colour, and God, don't you just love the smell of melted butter? I think it smells like heaven. So then we're going to want to literally, we just mix the butter with all our other ingredients. It's as simple as that. We just shove them in a bowl and mix them together. So we want 4 large handfuls of cornflakes. And as you put them in the bowl, just break them up. 1. 2. 3 and 4. Into the bowl we go. So the next thing you're going to want is flour, and as I mentioned, you're going to measure this literally in a cup. So we want 1 cup of flour, and this is self-raising flour. So when I say cup, I don't mean those enormous ones for like half a pint of tea, I mean just your regular cup. Although we do all love tea, so. Alright, so make the cup level, and that's with self-raising flour again, don't forget that. And then just tip that in. We're going to want half a cup of sugar. We're going to want 2 tablespoons. Just regular spoons really, but 2 regular heaped spoons maybe of cocoa. There we go. And just a tiny pinch of salt. Okay. The salt is really, it's not for flavour, don't worry, it's just to help the self-raising flour work and rise really nicely. So when this is all together, you're literally just going to pour that melted butter in and give it a really good mix. Make sure you try and get as much of this butter as you can because you're only putting in the one liquid. So you really need every gram of that. Now it's going to look at this point like the mix needs something else, and sometimes it might. Sometimes putting a dash of milk in there might be necessary if it's really dry or if you've got extra big hands, so you put in a lot of cornflakes. But mostly, normally, it just needs to carry on mixing. So there's a point when you think, oh no, I'm going to need more milk. But actually, if you just carry on mixing, it looks wetter after a few minutes. Cannot resist trying a bit. It's got this beautiful crunch from the cornflakes, which makes it almost like a fridge cake. It's like a cross between a cake and a biscuit. Yummy. Okay, so should look roughly like this when it's ready. So it sort of looks slightly damp, but kind of like in crumbs. And if you've got any large bits of cornflakes that haven't been crushed properly, then just crush them with the back of your spoon. Delicious! And the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to need to preheat the oven to a moderate oven. So I'd say if you were gas mark, that was about gas mark 4, and it's about maybe 150 degrees. The other great thing about this recipe, just to let you know, is that it's fantastic for people with allergies. So if you have someone who's lactose intolerant, you can replace the butter for, well, stork margarine is actually dairy free, but for whatever alternative they use. And it actually tastes really good if you make it with gluten-free flour as well. And it has no nuts, no seeds, no dairy, no soya. So you're pretty much covered, and no eggs if you have intolerance to that as well. So you're going to want to grease your pan. This is just a regular cake tin. It doesn't really matter on the size, but about this size is good. And if you just use either like the edge of your butter wrapper, or if you just squidge a knob of butter off and do it. It's a bit easier with the edge of the foil wrapper though. And make sure that when you're doing this, that you get all the sides. Because the sides are where it's going to stick the most. And then you just pour it in. So it's looking very much like a crumble mix at the minute. Now this bit's really crucial. You're going to want to push down. You're packing all of this as flat as you can possibly make it. And you can actually see how much the level's actually changing when you compact it. But this is basically what keeps it together when you cook it. So I'm trying to get a fairly even layer as well. There we go. Doesn't have to look perfect. Just pack it in there, and then we're going to shove it in the oven. So the cake's going to be in the oven for 20 minutes, and while that happens, we're going to make the butter icing. So we need about 50 grams of butter. You can see I'm just using that much, just what's left over. And then we're going to either put it in the microwave just for literally less than 10 seconds just to make it soften a bit, or I don't have a microwave, so I'm just going to shove it over the hob for literally about 10 seconds as well. So the idea here is not to burn it, so if it starts sizzling too much, then just turn it down a level. So we've got our butter that's slightly softened now. And I'm going to take a spatula. But again, you could just use a wooden spoon and the icing sugar. Now, making icing is a really rough art. There are no exact measurements. So basically what you want to do is just get the right consistency. So it should be thick enough that it's not going to run off the cake, but soft enough that it's still tasty to eat. And you can spread it. So to start with, if you were going to measure this, I'd say start off with half a cup of icing sugar. and we're going to cream that in. So we're just pushing that softened butter into the icing sugar. And then we're going to add a tiny bit of water. And when I say tiny bit, I mean if I were you, I would measure it with a teaspoon, because it's so easy to put just a tiny bit too much water in and just your whole icing is going to be so runny you'll never get it back. So 1/2 of a teaspoon. You can always add more water in icing, but once you've added too much, you just have to add a lot of icing sugar to try and retrieve it. And this should soften it up a bit and help make your butter icing a bit creamier. So I've now got a beautiful consistency of icing, but I've not got enough, so I'm going to add some more icing sugar. So that's probably another 1/2 cup. And another 1/2 teaspoon of water. This may seem like it's kind of a long process, but honestly it only takes 2 or 3 minutes, and it's so worth it, because if you have good icing then it's just finger licking good. So when you've got a lovely amount of icing and it looks kind of like this, beautifully mixed in, no lumps or anything, and a gorgeous creamy consistency, that's your butter icing. And you're going to add a flavour. So these are the 2 best flavours I personally think. You've got your caramel flavour, which was a limited edition, but I'm pretty sure that they still have it in the shops, so that one, or your peppermint. I'm going to do peppermint this time because it's my personal favourite, but do try the caramel if you're not particularly fond of the mint flavour. Now the recipe actually calls for 1.5 cups. I'm going to put 2 cups in because I'm crazy like that and because I love the mint flavour. But do feel free to, once you've mixed it, really mix it fully into your icing, and then do test it and see, because you've got the very, very strong sweet flavour of the icing sugar that's all in there. So do test it, and if you want to put some more flavouring in, then go ahead. It also depends on what brand of flavouring you use. So we've got our icing ready, and we've just taken the cake out of the oven, and very, very hot at the minute, so if we put that icing on there now, it would just melt and soak into the cake and turn into like a mushy mess. So we're going to leave it to cool for about 5 minutes. You don't even have to be in the room. Go do something else, do a piece of homework, watch a bit of a TV show, whatever, and then you're going to come back and we're going to take it out of the tin and then put the icing on. So now our cake has cooled down a bit, I can finally touch this again. We're just going to, if you very carefully just go round the tin, I've already done this with a metal knife just to check that it's loose. If you greased your pan with butter properly, it should be loose, so hopefully it will be. And then you put your hand, splay it as much as possible because you don't want this to break. You have to be quick with this. You're going to tip it till you get it out of the pan, so you're going to have a lovely biscuit. And then tip it up, and then we're going to get the icing and spread it evenly on top. Really evenly, hopefully. So as I said before, this is sort of a cross between a biscuit and a fridge cake, and it's really nice because you can just grab it and eat it like a biscuit, so with a cup of tea. So you have to be quite careful here because you're going to get bits of the base coming up into the icing because it's very crumbly. But that's okay, it doesn't ruin anything. Okay, so normally if I'm not putting chocolate on top for whatever reason, then I would just put something else on top of the icing to make it look a bit more finished. So I would either sprinkle a little bit of cocoa on top just to give it a nice kind of colour, or I would use sprinkles if you want to make it look more cheerful or more appealing to children. You need to use a very sharp knife to cut it because it is like a biscuit and it will just break or crumble. But I've cut them into slices. And yeah, this is your finished product. It looks delicious, it tastes delicious, and it really is just a yummy treat. And the best thing about this, apart from the fact that you can literally just chuck everything in a bowl and then chuck it in the oven for 20 minutes, is that it's very, very cheap. Cornflakes are practically nothing, and then you've just got flour and sugar really. So in total, to make an entire batch, I worked out that it costs just under £1. And so yeah, please comment below if you would like me to show you how to do anything else, or if it goes really badly wrong, if you want any tips or anything at all. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to go away and enjoy it. Goodbye.